A prehistoric forest has been found 9 miles off of the coast of Alabama into the Gulf of Mexico. Perfectly preserved. And since wood usually decays rather quickly, nothing like this has ever been found before in the entire world. Let's discuss. Back in 2004, Hurricane Ivan raged through with devastating results. Though before it ever touched down on land, it raged on in the Gulf of Mexico as a Category 5 hurricane. Its winds created the highest waves ever measured, weighing in at 98 feet tall. This is a picture of the hurricane's path. The green dots tell the path of the hurricane. They also happen to be right over where the prehistoric forest would later be discovered. Scientists believe that the forest had been underneath the Gulf of Mexico's sediment for eons. That's right, I said eons. Until the hurricane made such a ruckus that it removed the sediment and uncovered the forest. Most of the Gulf is flat sand, so when dive shop owner Chaz Broughton happened to dive the area and discovered a underwater riverbed with cypress trees hanging over it, he knew he had found something special. He described it as looking just like a prehistoric forest, the way it would look on land with cypress trees just hanging out over the riverbed. They started working right away to get this to be a protected site. Once word got out, lots of people wanted to go down and scavenge the place and try to make things out of prehistoric wood to be sold at high prices. So they worked to get this to be a protected land and got scientists in there to study the trees. They found the trees were so preserved that they even still had bark on them. And at this point, they believed that the trees had been uncovered by Hurricane Ivan, so it had been about 9 years since that event. They believed it was so well preserved because it was buried very deeply underneath sediment, and that cut off the trees from oxygen, which stopped decaying from occurring. After examining the site, scientists took samples of the wood. They actually tried to bring up a whole tree, but couldn't get the full thing into the boat. And so they cut on it and got a huge chunk of the trunk of a tree and took it back and spent a month and a half slowly drying it out so not to damage it. They tried to carbon date it, but it was so old it could not properly be carbon dated. This usually happens when something is older than 50,000 years. They did go back and they collected sediment and pollen and other small pieces of wood from the sea floor, which they were able to date back to 45,000 years. So they're really just guesstimating this forest to be around 60,000 years old, though it really could be much older. They believe that this forest may have been around with the dinosaurs, predating the dinosaurs. This thing is so old, it predates the pyramids of Egypt. Think about that. They did sonar testing and found hundreds of these trees still underneath the sediment. And then they took that piece of wood that they had spent a month and a half drying out. They sanded it down and cut into it. And as they sanded it down, it smelt like fresh, brand new wood. This really old wood. It was that preserved. And as they cut into it, 60,000-year-old sap actually came pouring out of it. And here's a picture of that sap being looked at underneath a microscope. The fact that it still has sap is amazing. They also examined the rings in the tree trunk and found they were actually very different from a modern day cypress tree's rings. They were much more narrow and even, which means the conditions in which it grew, or the environment, was very different from the modern environment of a cypress tree. They believe this forest may have been around for about 500 years, and then suddenly they all died off all at one time. The trees show signs of stress within the environment, and they believe that these trees may have been killed off by rising waters due to an ice age and icebergs melting and sending these trees underwater. It is already known that about half of Alabama at one time was underneath the sea. And there are people around Alabama that specialize in finding ancient shark teeth within riverbeds and such around Alabama. So we do know that the waters there used to be much higher. So it is believed that some ancient ice age from over 60,000 years ago took out this forest. And that this happened pretty fast. Probably in less than 1,000 years. Also, even though we know that a lot of Alabama used to be underwater, it was not previously known that the coastline of Alabama used to fall 9 miles away from the coast now. And given that these are cypress trees, the coast would have had to been much, much further out from this forest, because cypress trees do not do well in and near salt water. Salt water will kill them fairly quickly. The scientists say that studying this will not only give us an idea of how the lay of the land and the ecosystem was back then, but it will also give us an idea of what to expect as water rises more and more each year. AL.com has actually produced a short documentary about this forest, and if you would like to go and watch it, I will be putting the link to it down in my description box below underneath sources. I think this is such an amazing and interesting and peculiar find, because wood just decays so fast. There's never been anything like this found before. Most of the time when they find ancient relics, all the wooden parts of them is usually decayed away, only leaving the metal parts. So this is a very, very interesting find. But I want to know what you think about this peculiar occurrence down below. Have you ever heard of this prehistoric forest or anything like it? I know they're claiming there's nothing like it, and I've never heard anything like it. Let me know what you think about this down below. And while you're down there, don't forget to like this video, share it out to all your peculiar friends, and while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe if you're new and become part of our peculiar squad, and hit that little bell button so you always know when I upload. At least if you put it on all notifications, you know, YouTube might actually let you know that I uploaded. And until next time, keep your eyes peeled for all things peculiar. Do 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 do.